but the essential, unique dignity of my unique person, which is my unique story, goes on. That's where prayer comes from. That's the context of prayer. It's also the context of prophecy. Prayer comes to the unique self and prophecy comes to the unique self. We're building something together. We're trying to do something in the source code. We're not going for like a quick hit. We're in. We got to democratize prophecy. We got to reclaim evolutionary prayer. That's what we're here to do. We're going to unpack it step by step. We're going to have our third discussion on prayer. If you're here the first time, consider this the first time. You can start from exactly where we are. But let me just set a couple of kind of intention settings. So first, preparation matters. Okay? Ein kedusha b'li hachana. There is no sacred without preparing for the sacred. If you want to pray, you have to first do forepray. Forepray has to take place always before the making love of prayer. And just like in erotic relationship, in its sexual kind, there's something called foreplay. And foreplay doesn't mean I arouse particular body parts for a period of 2 minutes before penetration. That's what men think foreplay is. Got 4 things to do before that. Let's get them done so we can get on to the real business. That is not foreplay. Foreplay begins after the very last time that you made love. From the second after, for the entire day, 2 days, 3 days, week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, everything, it's all foreplay. Everything that happens in the living room and in the bathroom and on walks and in the details of life, it's all foreplay. It's all part of the fabric and the context out of which making love emerges. And foreplay is the same thing. And foreplay means that I'm always preparing to pray. I'm always getting ready to pray. I'm always on the edge of my seat. I'm on the edge of my life. I'm on the edge of my experience, about to burst forth into prayer. Like, okay, it's foreplay. I want to get a sense. Yesterday, I had the delight of performing a wedding. I spent about 3 hours yesterday afternoon in deep meditation about what to say and how to hold the depth of that short ceremony. And I'll show it to you, show and tell here. Okay. So this is just a sense of, this is my notes right here. Hold on. I'll just get to the whole thing here. Notes. Right? So, and I've done probably about, 1,000 weddings, right? There's a period, maybe 500. The period in my life, I did a lot of weddings. I think weddings are insanely beautiful and insanely important. And I can do a wedding with my eyes closed. And I know weddings well. I feel weddings, but you can't do that because a wedding is a prayer and you've got to do foreplay. And so I sat for 3 hours and just in a kind of the way Aurobindo used to write, I did kind of like an automatic writing to myself, just feeling through and thinking through the bride and the groom and their lives in this moment and what this moment was about. And then I left that document on my desk. And then I walked across the street where we are, and we had this intensely beautiful, stunning, maybe the whole thing, 20 minutes. Stunning. Because we prepared, we did foreplay. And the bride did foreplay, and the groom did foreplay, and the guests, right? A little group of people. Right? Greatness happens. Not when I move from thing to thing, I'm listening to it fast and I'm getting things done while I'm doing something. That's what we do, right? Step out of being what Heidegger called the busy, busy, busy man. Don't listen to things, read them. sleep 8 hours a night, no matter what's happening. Whatever you show up for and plumb the depths. Greatness is cumulative. And we're here together, my friends. This is not right. And if you're new, you didn't show up for like, here's weekly wisdotainment. This is not wisdotainment. This is mad love. But mad love is the deepest art in the world. And it's a particular kind of mad love. This is the mad love that recognizes the meta crisis, that recognizes existential risk, which is risk to the existence of humanity and profound risk to the existence of our humanity. We recognize the meta crisis and we don't turn away from it. This morning, I had a conversation. I won't name the person, a wonderful person who's one of the most famous kind of theologians in the world, theologian scholars in the world today. And I was trying to explain to him the meta crisis, and he said that I was just tolerating you the entire conversation. I'm not interested in this. There's nothing, I can't engage this. And I was trying to explain to him the information ecology and why it's broken down. He said, well, that's conspiracy theory stuff. He said, no, it's not. There are conspiracy theories. Those are real. But there's also a deflection of what's really happening by calling it a conspiracy theory. And my beloved Christina was in the room, and we walked there for an hour. I spent an hour, intense conversation, and a beautiful person who I love dearly. He looked away. He couldn't look at it. It was too much. We're not looking away. You can come close. You can step back. We don't look away. We're mad lovers of cosmos. We are a band of erotic mystics, and erotic mystics means I feel the eros of reality moving through me. That's what it means to be an erotic mystic. What is an erotic mystic? To be an erotic mystic means I feel the eros of reality moving through me. I know that the eros of reality is the love story of cosmos. And love stories have agony and love stories have ecstasy. And I know that the agony and ecstasy of my love story, of my eros, of my relationship, of my broken heart, of my trauma, of my potency, of my possibility, of the weaves of my heart, the murmurings of the sacred that palpitate, right, in the flutters of my interiors. I know that all of that is the eros of cosmos moving through me. And I know that as I make movement, as I step into my new living space and reconfigure my possibility to create, cosmos is reconfiguring its possibility to create. That every move I make in my life, every breath I take is cosmic. The erotic mystic realizes there's no split between the personal and the cosmic. The erotic mystic realizes there's no split between the personal and the cosmic. Does everyone get that? We've talked about it the last few weeks. In the 60s, right, women got something incredibly important, right? You know, I am woman, right? By the way, I apologize for telling you this. I am in love with the Helen Reddy song, I Am Woman, and I love the movie also. Okay, oh my God, I love Helen Reddy, I Am Woman, right? I mean, oh my God, I am woman. Woman rises, right? Luria in the 16th century calls it Aliyata Nukva, the ascent of the feminine. And women realized our bodies ourselves, and women realized the personal, the sexual, the intimate is political. They're not split. That's just the beginning, though. It's so much more than the personal is political. The personal is the cosmic. There's no split between the pulse of my own eros, my own foreprey and my own foreplay, my tumescence and my throbbing, my agony and my ecstasy, my holy and my broken hallelujah. It's all the pulse of she desiring to write the next chapter in the universal love story. And in this moment in time, those who realize that, those who say we're willing to do the crossing, we're going to cross to the other side. We're going to become the new human and the new humanity. We're going to move from being merely Homo sapien, in which my eros and my story and my sexuality and my agony and my ecstasy and my emotional structure and the gestalt of my psychology, it's all about me. No. That's not true. The erotic mystic realizes, you know what? It's not my life. It's totally my life. It's not my life at all. We've said so many times, I didn't decide where to be born, and when to be born and to whom to be born and with what proclivities and potencies and poignancies to be born. I didn't decide any of that, right? It's moving through me. It's in me, as me, and through me, and all of it needs me. And I am willing not to look away. I am willing to know that my story is chapter and verse in the universal love story. I am willing to know that I'm God's verb, I'm God's adjective, I'm God's participle, I'm God's dangling modifier. Right? I am the grammar of the divine in the world. And I am the language of Goddess. Goddess is infinite. God is infinite. God's intimate, and God's intimate through me, which is why we say God is the infinite intimate. It's like, like, wow. Can we feel that, my friends? Right, so wow, the personal is the cosmic. That's the realization of the erotic mystic. That's what an erotic mystic is. The erotic mystic realizes, one, the personal is not only the political, the personal is the cosmic. Two, the Eros of my life participates in the field of Eros. Three, the Eros of my story, my personal story, participates in the cosmic story. Four, the core of my story is a love story. My story is a love story. That's what my life is about. If I write my sacred autobiography, right? My friend Brent and Nitsa, I'm writing my sacred autobiography, and I realize it's a love story. To love is to be on the inside. To feel unloved is to feel like I'm alienated and I'm on the outside. To be an erotic mystic is to know that my love story is chapter and verse in the universal love story. 4. 5, to be an erotic mystic, Eros. Right? Mystic meaning I'm the inside of the interior sciences. The interior sciences, I'm on the inside of reality. I'm living on the inside. I'm not living on the outside. I realize that it's not just that my story is chapter and verse. It's actually that I'm the author of the new love story. I'm writing the new chapters. It's an unfinished story. And I am direct cause for the evolution of love, which is the plot line of the universal love story. The plot line of the universal love story is more love and more goodness and more truth and more value and more creativity and more depth and more poignancy and more gnosis. So when I realize it's not just that my story is chapter and verse in the universal love story, it's not just that it's an unfinished story, it's not just that I'm writing another new chapter in the story, I'm cause for the advancement of the plot line of reality, which is the intention of all of manifest existence. And manifest existence does not exhaust itself in one dimension. We live in a multi-dimensional world. And we're in a generation, my friends. We're in a generation where for the first time, we're poised between utopia and dystopia. We're in this moment of unbearable meaningfulness. We're in this moment of virtually unbearable intimacy with all that is. We're in this moment of virtually unbearable significance. And when we can't stand the significance, we look away into the details of our lives and we get lost in portended pettiness, going down pathways, right, of irrelevant, right, avoiding the perils, but also avoiding the full potency and power and poignancy, right, of our lives. It's like, we turn away because the significance of my life in this moment of time is virtually unbearable. Until I realize that I have power, until I realize that I can affect the whole thing, until I realize that I am cause for the evolution of love. Like, like, wow. Okay. So that's our context. That's our intention setting. And in this story, one of the key sacred skills, technologies, potencies is the potency of prayer. And this is our third conversation, but in some sense it's our first, because we're gonna go deep into like the very core of prayer today and next week. Prayer is a potency of human power. And David's about to read the code, but I just want to get this for a second so you understand our context. We normally think that prayer is an abandonment of human power. Prayer is an emasculation. Kant famously said that modern people don't want to be caught praying, because praying is an abandonment. It's the way we experience it, of dignity and of possibility and of potency and of power. We feel like we're not sovereign. We have to turn to pray. That's precisely not true. Prayer is this potency of human power. It's an unimaginable potency of human power, and we cannot engage the meta crisis without a new story of value, which becomes a grammar of value, which allows us to overcome the global intimacy disorder and respond through creating global coherence and global resonance, which is required for global coordination. It's only a shared story of value that allows us to overcome the global intimacy disorder, which then allows us to create global resonance and global coherence, which then allows for global coordination in response to global challenges. Without that, we can't move. Now, to create that intimacy, and as an intrinsic part, an intrinsic dimension, right, of this new story of value is prayer. Prayer is essential to the story. There's multiple forms of prayer we're going to talk about, but at its very core, there's a core to prayer without which we can't move. We can't work, without which we're lost in a kind of unbearable and inappropriate and epistemologically wrong loneliness. Because prayer is the beginning of the end of loneliness. So we're going to talk about prayer. Okay, so David, give us the code. It's like insanely great to be together, and it's just an insane privilege. I want to ask you, please don't take it for granted that we're together. It's a big deal that we get to understand each other, that we get to create a community which is committed to the evolution of love, which is committed to telling the new story of value, which is committed to not getting lost, as most people did in Florence, in that original time between worlds in the Renaissance, where most of Florence was partying or involved in papal politics, and there was this small group of people who created the new world. So we need to be those people. This is our generation. This is our time. This is our moment. We're erotic mystics. We're ready to go. And here's the intention. If I can ask you a question tenderly, is that okay? I want to ask you the formal question that we do every week, but we're asking it not for information. We're asking it as ritual, and see if I can find us in the chat box. Okay, so as ritual, here's the question. You ready? Okay, here's the question. The question is, are we ready to go the whole way in this lifetime? Are we ready to go the whole way in this lifetime? Are we ready to play a larger game? We're not just doing spiritual. We're not doing new age. We're not doing fundamentalism. Are we ready to play a larger game? Are we ready to transfigure from Homo sapien to Homo amor? Are we ready to participate in the evolution of love? Are we ready to actually take ourselves seriously and confess not our sin, but our greatness? And to know that we are the cosmo-erotic universe in person, and that reality needs our service desperately. And that when I transcend the narrowness, I transcend the narrowness of kind of superficial fulfillment, and I bracket my superficial fulfillment in order to access my deepest heart's desire. And we create a relationship with each other of sacrificial reciprocity. Sacrificial reciprocity, which is basically a rephrasing, right, of a phrase from evolutionary thought, where we talk about reciprocal altruism. David Sloan Wilson wrote a book about it, an evolutionary biologist at upstate New York in Binghamton. Right? We sacrifice for each other. To be intimate is to sacrifice, and to sacrifice is to be intimate. There is no intimacy without sacrifice. In the original Hebrew, the very word intimate has three meanings. Karov, K-A-R-O-V, karov has three meanings. Karov or korban has three meanings. One is I'm intimate. Two is I'm a victim, korban. And three is sacrifice. So the reason it has three meanings is because we generally view making sacrifice as being a victim. But actually, that's not the nature of reality. Reality is a series of sacrificial acts in which we are born. Can you feel that? Reality is a series of sacrificial acts in which we are born, right? Mutual sacrifice is the ground for individuation. Mutual sacrifice is the ground for unique self. Why does reality exist at all? Because infinity sacrificed herself to create, to manifest reality. And infinity fell in love with the productions of time, wrote William Blake. God, goddess, reality is not just infinite reality, it's the infinite intimate meaning. To be intimate means, karov, to be close means korban, I sacrifice. There is no intimacy without radical sacrifice. And there is no being born other than out of sacrifice. I'm born out of sacrifice. And stay close with me for a second. There's this talk about a drive for a libidinal pleasure that Freud talked a lot about. And Adler, kind of plays it a kind of a drive for status, Alfred Adler. And then, of course, along comes the third school of Viennese therapy, logotherapy. Viktor Frankl talks about this drive for meaning. And there's other people talk about a drive for creativity. But underneath all of that, there's a drive to sacrifice. There's a drive to sacrifice. Can you hear that, everybody? It's like deep, it's deep, it's deep, it's deep, it's deep. I am driven to, now if I don't sacrifice myself on the altar of a right cause, which is Eros. Eros is right sacrifice. That's what Eros is. Eros is right sacrifice. If I don't sacrifice myself on the altar of the right cause, and then I'm drawn in by pseudo-Eros, and I sacrifice myself in a way that destroys the world in all the wrong places, in all the wrong ways, for all the isms, for all the ideologies of emptiness. I sacrifice myself because I can't live without self-sacrifice. I'm born in the sacrifice of self. But the sacrifice of self means I sacrifice superficiality. I sacrifice surface, right? The Zen master says to the novice, die on the cushion. Sacrifice yourself in order to be born. I don't sacrifice myself in order to disappear. I sacrifice myself in order to appear. I don't sacrifice myself to abandon my desire. I sacrifice myself to identify my deepest heart's desire. Sacrifice. Intimacy is about sacrifice. No one wants to talk about it, right? Self-fulfillment. No, you fulfill self through sacrifice, right? John Donne, come, my darling, that I may die with you, right? Right. We have to die with each other in order to live, but not to physically die. When I'm dying inappropriate, sometimes we have to physically die, but mostly we don't. Mostly, right, that hasn't been demanded of most of us on this phone call. Has been demanded of many other people around the world, but most of us on this phone call, right, in the Western liberal world or conservative world, at least for now, that kind of sacrifice hasn't been demanded. It's a different kind of sacrifice. I've got to die to all that's not my deepest heart's desire. Does that make sense? And I have to identify what is my true desire. I have to clarify my true desire. And my true desire is the desire of God. It's theosis, right? I am ontically identified with the divine, even as I pray to she. She holds me, and yet I'm identified with her. And my deepest heart's desire is her desire. Devotion and desire are completely identical. They're the same phenomenology. I'm in mad devotion to you. Whether it's creatively, aesthetically, emotionally, sexually, I'm in mad devotion, I'm in mad desire. They're the same. They're the same, right? Devotion and desire, right? We sacrifice ourselves in order to be born, which is why there's no split. To sacrifice is not to be a victim. That's false sacrifice. That's pseudo sacrifice. True sacrifice is I sacrifice myself in the field of value in order to be born and individuated as the most glorious and wondrous, unique self that's madly needed by all that is. It's from that place that I pray. That's the context for prayer. That's who I am. That's who I bring to prayer. Okay, so are we ready? We're ready to play a larger game. We're ready to play a larger game. We're ready to participate in the evolution of love. We're ready to do the crossing, to cross to the other side. We're ready to be the ones that we've been waiting for. We're the ones we've been waiting for. Okay, so if you're up for a small game, you came to the wrong place, right? And I apologize for that. And if you feel like I'm a pain in the ass, you're probably right. My mother thought so also. I apologize. And if there's anything you think that I got wrong, take that as for granted that you're right. Who cares? But let's be in this together. We need each other. And there's nothing more beautiful than to need each other, right? To need you is to love you. I love you. I need you. To really say I love you, say I need you, but not codependent need, not surface need, but the deepest, most profound need that beloveds have for each other at the very edge of fulfillment, where need is the highest dignity, where I say your need is my allurement. Your need is my allurement. Tell me how to take you home. Tell me how to take you to heaven. Let's take each other to heaven. Let's be a unique self-symphony where we feel each other. We know each other, right? We taste each other's heart, right? We are in the full dignity of playing our unique self-instrument in the unique self-symphony. We see the meta-crisis and we respond with mad sovereignty, mad agency, mad dignity, mad sacrifice, and mad self-fulfillment, mad being born together. These are the contexts. These are the beginnings of the context for prayer. David, give us a code, brother. Give us a code.
There's so much there. And I'm reminded as you were sharing, kind of pointing out instructions for prayer, I feel like that's the way I'm experiencing this infinite intimate that you've helped us see. And I'm just so grateful for that. And as I go into Lent, this Wednesday starts Lent in the Catholic Church, I'm asking myself, what am I going to sacrifice? What am I being called to sacrifice? And so we're all looking at that. What are we being called to sacrifice? And as we have a conversation with God, we can ask that question. So here's today's evolutionary love code. Talk to God because God wants to talk to you and you want to talk to God. That conversation is the purpose of creation. Talk to God because God wants to talk to you and you want to talk to God. That is the purpose of creation. And I turn my word back to you, Dr. Marc.
David, thank you. I a little bit apologize to everyone, right? Slightly insincerely, but I know we're spending a lot of time on the context, but it matters. See, let me try and say it like this, okay? Prayer is a conversation, right? It's a conversational cosmos all the way up and all the way down. That's the nature of cosmos. Or let me say it a little differently. Let's say it like this. We live in a storied cosmos. I want to have this little bracket about story for a second to get where we are, because we're gonna need this for prayer. And the next few weeks, we live in a storied cosmos. To step out of the plot line of the cosmic story is to lose the thread. That's two. If you want to read maybe the best book in Western literature that talks about losing the thread, it's Kafka's book. What was it called? The Trial, where K, who's the protagonist, he can't find the thread of his story. He can't follow what's happening. He's lost the plot line. Maybe next week, I'll read some quotes. It's an incredible, Kafka's incredible. And he's talking about this sense that the modern human being has lost the plot line. In some sense, pre-modernity falsified the story. Pre-modernity edited the story. Pre-modernity forged and plagiarized the story, right? And each nation said the plot line's the rise of my nation. The plot line's my ethnocentric triumph. The plot line is my emasculation of self and obedience to a God who is other and distant from cosmos. It was a falsified story, sometimes distorted at its core. The plot lines were distorted. But what happened in modernity is we lost the plot line. We literally lost the plot line of the story. That's what Kafka is saying in through the figure K in The Trial. Right? We've lost the plot line. We can't find our way. We've destoried the cosmos. And in order to respond to reality, we have to wake up, right? Wake up to our genuine identity. We have to grow up and deepen our psychological maturity and actually access in a deep way higher and deeper structure stages of developmental consciousness. That's all true. We have to lighten up, meaning clean up the darkness, the shadow. We have to integrate shadow. Those are all true. We have to open up. We have to open up, right, to the field and currency of Eros that moves through reality. Those are all important. We'll talk about not now, but I want to add one. We have to story up. To story up is the opposite of to destroy. To destroy is to destory. Does that make sense? We lose the storyline in some essential way. So we live in a storied cosmos. One dimension of story is conversation, right? A story means there's a conversation. We're talking to each other. There's an exchange of information, and information is not bits and bytes. Shannon got, as my friend Howard Bloom always says, the scientist, Shannon got the math right and the metaphor wrong. Right? Reality is composed of information, but information is not bits and bytes that are neutral. Information is, as Warren Weaver, who wrote with Shannon at Bell Labs in the late 40s, as Warren Weaver correctly points to, right? Information is meaning. Reality is coded with information means reality is coded with meaning, and meaning means value. And every conversation has implicitly and explicitly an exchange of value. So I just want to get this. It's hard not to burst out crying with what I'm about to try and share with you now. I'll just try and say it in one sentence. So prayer and prophecy, those are the two major conversations in cosmos. In prophecy, God initiates and God invokes. In prayer, the human being initiates and the human being evokes. But in both conversations, there's a realization that we need each other. So for divinity to sacrifice herself, for divinity to sacrifice himself, for divinity to sacrifice itself, because divinity is not him, her, or it. It's something larger. It's both. It's all of it. So for divinity to sacrifice, for divinity to engage in kenosis, to empty myself out in order to receive you, that's an act of a sacrificial act. It's not a thrusting forward. It's a withdrawal. Foreplay is not about thrusting forward. Foreplay is about stepping back to make room for you, to empty myself out so you can be here and be present and be alive with me, right? So when the infinite says, I'm going to disclose myself not merely as the infinity of power, but as the infinity of intimacy. And God is the infinity of intimacy, and the name of God that we call in cosmorotic humanism, and in every generation, we have to call the new name of God that's disclosed in that generation. And calling the name of God from the previous generation doesn't work. God doesn't respond, and we can't hear the divine. God is the infinite intimate. All of the exterior sciences, all of physics, and all of molecular chemistry, and the false split between organic and inorganic chemistry, all of reality, all of manifest reality, all the way up and all the way down. Not all of it is in the infinite. And it's also so intimate and so close, right? And so filled with pathos, right? There's this deep, subtle, right? Emotional, sensual, erotic relationship between the human being and the divine. And the major text for that in the canon, right, of civilization is the Song of Songs, the Song of Solomon, which is called the Holy of Holies, the ultimate song. And it's an intimate, right, infinite, right, erotic, sometimes bordering on pornographic, right, explicit love story, right, of the lover and the beloved, right, coming together in a particular way, right? So there's the infinite and the intimate. So God's the infinite intimate. God's the infinite intimate. And what God is saying, what she is saying, she who lives in us and who holds us is saying, by saying, pray to me, God is saying, you have something that's of value to me. I value our relationship. I need your prayer. Something happens to you that allows me to gift you, to hold you, to love you, to respond to you, to hear you when you pray. And I manifested reality so that there should be not just the infinite, but the infinite intimate. And the language of the infinite intimate is prayer. When the lover is on her knees before the beloved in the mad devotions of desire, they are praying. They're saying, I need you. They're saying, your need is my allurement. And whenever we're on our knees, we're always on our knees to God. So God says to the human being, oh my God, I need your prayer. It's like, what could that even mean? God says to the human being, the infinite intimate says to the human being, your need is my allurement. And this conversation between us, right? In this story in which we are both actors and actresses. What reality means is that there's a story. The ontology of reality is story. Reality is not merely a fact. Reality is a story, and both the infinite and the intimate divine and the infinite intimate human being, both God and man, both God and woman, both divinity and frail and fragile and glorious human beings, right, are the actors. We're the characters together in a story. I want to get what that means. We've been cast by eternity in the same story as God. And God's the playwright, and God's also the casting director. So, to get how shocking that is, she cares about the details of my life, of your life. But how could that even be? Right? How could we have a cosmos that's infinite and vast with 100 billion galaxies? Doesn't that by definition mean that God doesn't care about me? No, not in the slightest. Not in the slightest. It's an infinite galaxy, right? With 100 billion galaxies in it, with unimaginable possibilities for life and for a galactic teeming with life. But that has nothing to do with, right? Or that doesn't in any way undermine. If anything, it amplifies, right, the utter dignity of my personhood, which is madly desired by the divine. I want to get this together. It's a conversation. It's a story. We're in the same story together. But not only are we in the same story together, we need each other in this story. And to lose the conversation, to step out of the conversation, is to be alienated from the essential nature of reality itself. We're no longer in the conversational cosmos, right? It's a conversational cosmos. The conversational cosmos is a feature of the storied cosmos. Does that make sense, everyone? Just feel it. Don't think about it. Just feel it. And in my story and my conversations are the text, right? My story is chapter and verse in the universal love story, and my conversation is the text. Of the cosmos' conversation. What do you think people are training artificial intelligence on now? Human conversation. Right? Human conversation. And it's artificial intelligence now is being trained on Reddit forums and Quora forums to try and understand something about human conversation. And of course, understand means to try and extrapolate principles without actually feeling the music of conversation, which is one of the reasons that artificial intelligence poses an existential danger, because we actually don't know what it's going to do with information, which becomes for artificial intelligence protocols of prediction, which simulate conversation, but which are actually not conversation. That's a big deal. If you caught those sentences, that's a very big deal. But bracket that for a second. Prayer is the apex of conversation, which is initiated by the human being and invited by the divine. Prophecy is the apex of conversation initiated by the divine and entered into, the human being does for prophecy, right, in order to actually access the possibility of the prophetic conversation. And we need to reclaim prayer. We need to evolve prayer. We need to articulate a vision of evolutionary prayer, and we need to reclaim prophecy. The artist is the prophet. The artist in their depth, not the surface artist. There's false prophets and there's superficial artists. but the depth of the artist and the depth of the prophet participate in the same field. That's what we're going to talk about in these weeks, my friends. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about prophecy. We're going to talk about prayer, but we're going to talk about these as core categories of what it means to be a human being, but not an emasculated human being, a human being who's potentiated with potency and power that is unimaginable. Prayer, I want to say it again, is a primary human potency of power. And it begins with the realization we are in a story with the infinite intimate. Can you imagine being cast with God in a play and a starring role? That's actually the nature of my life. That's not a metaphor. It's not a metaphor. Not a metaphor. That's ontology. That's ontology. And I'm going to tell you a secret, okay? I'm going to tell you so you can, it's with permission. I always say we, but I want to kind of, I can just turn to you in second person, my friends. Can I just talk to you directly? Is that okay? Okay. You know this is true. In other words, it's what Copperfield meant. It's what Dickens had Copperfield mean when he talked about, I want to be the hero of my own life. It's what Laura Riding, the great literary figure, meant when she said, until the story of my life is told, I will go on quietly craving it. We know that. We know our stories matter. That's all we think about all the time is our stories and our last set of conversations. And right, we live in a conversational cosmos. We are that conversation, and we live in this depth of our story, and we're not focused on our story because our therapist didn't free us from our egocentric predicament, and our Zen master didn't liberate us and teach us how to move beyond story. No, of course we should get out of the recursive loops, and we should get out of the trauma voices, and we should do our trauma work. Yes, and of course we should die on the cushion to a superficial version of a victim story. Of course. But then we're born into the ultimate dignity of my story. And then stay with me just one more second, okay? So if I'm 38 years old, or I'm 62, or I'm 78, the question is, what is the next part of my story? How does my story cause the evolution of love? And I'm going to tell you a little secret, okay? The second I die, and yes, every single person on this phone call will die, because that's the sacrifice. And we know there's continuity of consciousness, but yet we need to experience the sacrifice. Come, my darling, that I may die with you. We cited it earlier, but at the end of our lives, we die, meaning at the end of our lives, we need to be prepared for a moment of radical sacrifice. And it's that moment of sacrifice that orients our life. And then that sacrifice births us into the next chapter in the story, right? And that's how it works. It's a story. And there's a continuity of consciousness in the story. You know, I was reading Plotinus this week. Plotinus is unbelievable. He's one of my favorite human beings. And I came across a scholar in a passage in Plotinus, right, who basically says something like the following, right? Because my individuality exists in the mind of God, because the mind of God is never erased. So the continuity of consciousness, says Plotinus, is such that the irreducible uniqueness of my personhood never disappears. I think it's not just that there's this general continuity of consciousness in some kind of vague sense. No, I go on. Might not have red hair, might have a slightly different body shape. I might be a boy instead of a girl instead of a boy. I might be rich or poor, live in a different place. But the essential unique dignity of my unique person, which is my unique story, goes on. That's where prayer comes from. That's the context of prayer. It's also the context of prophecy. Prayer comes to the unique self, and prophecy comes to the unique self. So we set the stage today. Is that right? Did we set the stage today, my friends? Did we set the stage? We set the stage. Okay, we didn't get there. We're staying, okay? And I want to just invite you, just pretty please with sugar on top, as we used to say in seventh grade, maybe third grade, right? In Columbus, Ohio, pretty please with sugar on top. Stay in. Okay, stay in. We're building something together. We're trying to do something in the source code. We're not going for like a quick hit. We're in. We got to democratize prophecy. We got to reclaim evolutionary prayer. That's what we're here to do. We're going to unpack it step by step. So next week, we're going to pick up from here. But if you haven't been here, you can just start afresh next week. We're going to enter our fourth conversation on prayer. We're deepening until we're going to explode an ecstatic prayer of 3 different forms. That's where we're going. Okay. because I just want to check in for a second, okay? Was this helpful to everyone to begin to kind of orient and find our way into prayer? And can we feel what we're trying to do in terms of evolving the source code itself? We want to evolve the source code itself, right? We want to actually begin to actually feel and reclaim prayer in the very source code of reality itself. Does that make sense? Okay. Whenever we're on our knees, we're always on our knees to God. And in that we're born. We die to superficiality. The opposite of the sacred is the superficial. Last sentence, my friends, right? We've said it before, but I want to end here. We've said before that the Hebrew word Messiah, the Messiah means like, yes, right? The most beautiful and good and true world that we always imagined as possible. It means the potential for a world in which debasement is not at the core, in which dignity is at the core. Human dignity, with no one left out of the circle. In which every conversation is a sacred conversation. In which conversation is not a ritual of rejection, right? But it's a ritual of mad love. So the word Messiah means conversation. That's what it means. So that the vision of the possible world is a world where conversation, right, happens the way it should. Every conversation, if I'm living on the inside, if I'm an erotic mystic, every conversation changes reality. Right? A conversation is converse. Converse means it turns it around. It reverses. So conversation is both a verse, it's a text of the cosmic scroll, but it's converse. It flips everything around. In every conversation, in any conversation that's authentic and real, and it goes all the way, everything changes. God, mad love. That's I'm just tears in my eyes. I'm so honored by you being with me in this conversation. It just makes me madly joyous. So just thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Marc Gafni. Please know that we publish this weekly broadcast every Friday on Substack. Another beautiful way to study together and practice together is, like Marc said, at Eros Mystery School. It's coming so close. I can feel the aliveness building and building. It's April 28th until May 2nd here in Holland, in Europe. Finally, Marc said it already, next week, right after One Mountain, we have this amazing, mind-blowing webinar masterclass. I think it's actually the first time that Marc Gafni and Aubrey Marcus are teaching online in dialogue. Of course, they have done many, many podcasts together. But this Sunday, right after One Mountain. So we'll put that link in the chat box as well, so you can register for it. It's totally free and it's going to be mind-blowing, amazing. We're going to learn more about what it actually means to become an erotic mystic, responding to the meta crisis with this new incredible story of cosmo-erotic humanism. So make sure that you are there next week.